Hello, friends, family, and keepers of the true faith, to Blog 43. This one is dated 18th of December 2022. And all I can say is thank you very much for watching these blogs. It was an experiment. I looked back the other day at my introduction blog, um, where I set out a charter, well, a sort of a charter, where I said it was going to be a warts and all. I wanted it to show the changes that happen when you're in a good mood, that you value how you look, how you express yourself. When you're down, you don't care whether you're unshaven, whether your hair's a mess, and how you then change that aspect of you. And for the most part, I found it very therapeutic talking to the camera. I had in the back of my mind what I wanted out of this. And first of all, this was actually going to be something that was recorded behind closed doors, and it could still end up that way. And what I mean by that is I do a video blog. I talk about what's happened this week. I then save it. I put it somewhere in the cloud or on a NAS drive. And if anything happened to me, family would able to take a good look at how I am, how I express myself, what things cheer me up, what things don't, and the hardships of things that have gone on during the week, and how I tackled them. But the other side of it was also that what I tended to find, even when I had friends that were physical, is that we would always meet up to do something, go to the pictures, go for a pint, whatever. And we'd always end up talking about what we'd watched that week, what happened at work that week, etc., etc. And these people used to come round and they'd see your shelves full of DVDs, and they'd borrow the odd thing, they'd watch you play a game, and it would sort of entice them to get it themselves, all of that sort of stuff. And that's where you come in. So with those physical friends not there, the camera becomes those friends. And when it comes to how YouTube works, it's still a mystery to me. And I had in the back of my mind that I wanted, if there were subscribers, if it ever did happen, and this was back in the very first video, great. And if it didn't, then I know that I could still keep going, because it was a worthwhile thing for me to do. As the subscriber base started to increase, you get excited. And you then notice that you've got a ball that's now rolling, and you want it to pick up speed. And you want that speed to keep going, but while it's rolling, you want it to pick up moss, grow. And basically, around about halfway through, around about episode 20, I'm going to set a target, and that target would be 100 subscribers. And the thing I wasn't going to do was look closely too much at that, but I would look at the views. The views would be very important to me. They would tell me where people are dropping off, what bits are boring, etc., etc. So while this is going on, some of my friends have also picked up the baton and tried to do their own little shows, and for the most part, they've had greater success. And people have advised me, about keywords, about doing a little snapshot picture, be more direct with what it is you're trying to show. And because there is a conflict. What I'm trying to do for family and what I'm trying to do for you guys, some things can get a bit verbose when it comes to titles. Pictures, generally, to me, I've never been an artist, but I've been very good at editing other people's work, let's just say. So I'm quite good at taking, say, a comic book that's now become very aged because it's 40 years old. I can scan those. I can use the curve tool in Photoshop, and I can use, contrast, brightness, saturation, hues to bring that back to how it should have looked 40 years ago. But ask me to do a picture of something, really, it's a lot of work for something that I wouldn't really get, well, one's too much pleasure out of, although I do like drawing, but also one that wouldn't look particularly good at the end. So I'd be spending a lot of time with a product that still wouldn't look great. And so therefore the snapshots came in with just a font, just telling you, hey, this is what this is about. And the idea was that if I got to my goal of 100 subscribers, or I've got my views remaining a constant, I would therefore continue it into the second year. So the reason I bring this up is because basically next week it will be Boxing Day. So I will still be doing a blog, and there we go. We've got Christmas out the way, and we get to the next week, and it's New Year. And during that period, I've tended to find that I reflect a lot. I look back and I go, what worked, what didn't work. And I always have the same New Year's resolution, which is do things differently next year, because what you did this year didn't work. And the things that did work, keep doing that. Such a generalization, but I've never been into New Year's resolutions. I think they put sometimes a lot of pressure on you. Oh, I'm going to give up smoking. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to run. And you tend to find by March, didn't do any of that. And for some people, it really, really works. It's great to have goals. The trouble is, you never know when you're affecting your own, whether those goals are realistic. Some of them can be, some of them you can push yourself too hard and get yourself unwell. So I'm mentioning this at the beginning because I wanted to give what's going to be happening over the next 2 weeks, and there will be a reflection part, and then I will make decisions on continuing or not. The good news about having two sides of a coin on something like this is it will continue for my family. It's whether it turns into something that is live that everybody can see. And we will see. I've really enjoyed this. You know full well that anybody that watches this I consider pretty much a part of my family. It's one of those things where at some point, though, you've got to say to yourself, is the hours and hours and hours that you spend recording into devices to remind you of things, which is how I do things. If I watch something, I record and say, I watched this today and it was really good. And then I come to Saturday and I collate all that into written word, and then I basically do my blog. So there's a lot of effort, and it's fun, but is it fun over a continual time for a small, very, very small audience? And I think I will continue. At the moment, my mind is saying, keep going, keep going. There's a lot of people out there and a lot of love for you. But there's also that side of me that goes, I will need at some point something from you guys, whether it be questions, comments, something that sparks something. And if the numbers are the same, people will dwindle off. And when they dwindle off, that can be demoralising. So anyway, dwell upon that. The news! Let's get the news. Right, war, Ukraine. We know how this works. Ukraine has accused Russia of planning a wide-ranging offensive in the new year. Kiev is a top priority for Russia. Both sides have ruled out a Christmas truce, and no talks are aimed at ending this conflict. So, do you see how it is? Everything is all miserable. What can I say about that? Well, we all know the stories of World War One, where there was a truce in a football game, and we know that wars can go on for years, and this is the very first year. But to think that nobody, including the Warsaw Pact and NATO and all that, are not even considering the possibility that there could be a phone call on Christmas Eve to say, "Oi, stop," is sad. We all just want it to go away. I was hoping that this news bit of the Ukraine would end for 2023, but it looks very much like it won't. So the next news story, and this is quite personal really, and quite close, because we're going to be talking about Gary Glitter. Now, what do I know about Gary Glitter? Well, he came actually from a town very close to where I live. And anybody, including all my friends when we used to talk about him, were at one point very proud, and then when all the things came out about him, disgusted. And now he's sort of a word that we whisper. Oh, don't talk about him. No, it's such a disgrace. How can anybody not look at our town and think anything but bad things? Yes, Paul Gadd, Gary Glitter. He's going to be released from prison in February after serving half of his 16-year term. If you haven't known already, he was in prison for many reasons, but mostly based around child pornography. There was a rape case and everything else on this. He will be tagged on release. So, Paul Gadd, we don't talk about too much. And when it comes up in the news and it's on the front page of the news, like it was yesterday, we hang ourselves in shame a little bit because I'm very close to this town where he came from. So, enough said about that, really. It's funny that in the 70s, I'd hear his music, because he was very much a glam rocker. And glam rock, when you're in your single digits, the ages of 5 to 9, you'd listen to the radio, and your mum and those glam rock sounds were very boppy, and that's what kids love. I'm sure you've seen your kids when you've got them tied up in the back of your car and you're listening to Adele or whatever, and they're singing along and bopping and all of that. That's pretty much what would be happening for me back in the 70s, when my father was driving me around and the radio was on. We would want those boppy tunes on. So when you have a fall as big as Gary Glitter's, it's a person that comes quite close, then what can you do? Just wait for the phone to be picked up by my mother, so sorry about the noise. Won't be long. It's almost as bad as Mainmeister with his controversy with a Google device, shall we say. Okay, and then we've got a little bit about strikes, like I mentioned last week, which was the ambulance strike. So the ambulance staff strike is still a green light for the 21st and the 28th of December, and it's over pay. the last strike that happened earlier this week, which was a trust strike, that has an estimate of 70,000 patients were affected in that one day. And only half the trusts got involved because not all the trusts agreed on the strike. And when they did agree, it was too late because the day had come. They reckon it will take weeks for those patients now to get their appointments. So even with half of the trusts only being involved, they got their point across. And we have to look at this as going, the people that are being affected here is the poor patients. And all because the government haven't got the money to keep us above the inflation rate. And yet, I do understand how difficult it is that we rob Peter to pay Paul, and money comes in all the time, but it's segregated to other areas, like the road tax probably pays the bills for the NHS and all sorts of stuff when desperate things are going on. And the government can't control as closely as they want where we get our fuel from and why the petrol prices are going up, and then they put in little things to try and help by dropping off 5 pence here, 10 pence there, times that by 70 million, and basically you think you've got a big pot of whack of cash, but you haven't. All I can do is wish the ambulance crew well, and I'm fully behind you in the fact that you are underpaid and you are respected. Shout outs now. As you know, this is usually my favourite bit, and I'm hoping that my frown, if I've got one, it turns into a smile. So the people I want to shout out to have all left a comment this week. They are Rebob Art, LFC Gamer, GTB Films, Mainmeister, Colin Jones, Martroid, Denny, Steve's Gaming, 20th Century Gaming, Rocket Bunny, and Jambomb. Thank you very much. And I'm sure because of those numbers only just about go into their teens, that I've had a lot of people that have watched last week's blog and have appreciated it. It's got some very nice likes to it. But the numbers over the last 3 weeks have dipped from 180 odd views to 130 odd. And this is where I was saying that I'm looking at reflection in the next couple of weeks. But I'm enjoying what I'm doing, so that's really good. And I haven't done too much this week. There was the blog last week, and I did a little look at some DLC. And I spent the whole week planning a gaming history. But unfortunately, with my situation with planning for Christmas, going back to work, looking after my mother, something always turned up that would take it away. And with the low light that we get, if you didn't put something to video by about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, your light's gone. And therefore everything kept going on to another day, to another day, to another day. The good news is I've written it all down. It's now just a matter of recording it. So I'm pretty sure it'll come out soon. So we'll start off with some of these comments. We'll start off with Rocket Bunny, because that one is right at the top. He looked at the whole of my blog and basically has given his own opinion. I mentioned last week about the US-Russia prisoner exchange, and he agrees it's horrifying. It is. And he also mentioned a little bit about my little story about my granddad and the stories that he used to tell me. Very important that I miss those. I miss my father the most because he was always around. But my grandfather died literally in the COVID situation, so in the last year and a half. And the only thing we would really talk about was the past. You know, how he used to go scrumping, how he used to do things on the farm. When he became a man, working at the concrete plant and at the Peugeot plant, and his time during the war. So I missed that. He agreed a little bit with me about decorations. Well, I think that probably mirrors only because there's no space for me to put decorations up, and they wouldn't really aid too much. I said it pretty much last blog. But also, I'm by myself in this room. Nobody comes into it other than my mother. So, what's the point? Look at last week's waffle in regards to why you should do that. Having a bright thing might reflect on you, and you might then have a smile, and your smile will then go out there in the real world. But at the end of the day, I sort of stopped putting Christmas decorations when I sold my house. So that's 2005. And I think I'm a little bit too far gone, really, to want decorations up, but I haven't got the space anyway. That's the problem. Space is the problem. So this is the bit at the end with a question. He's basically put some nice things here. We've had some great chats on Steam Discord this week, Delboy. Your history of watching TV shows rivals, nay, exceeds my own. So let me ask then, name your top 10 favourite classic or older TV series you've enjoyed over the years. Maybe include some that are less known, but you think we all might enjoy, along with more well-known ones. For example, one of mine is a one-off 6-part series made in the early 70s by Barry Letts and Terence Diggs, which was called Moonbase 3. By the way, it took him ages to try and find copies of that particular program. Yes, I can understand that. It was a BBC American co-production in 1975. He says it's cheap, it's dark, but it's brilliantly written, and the acting was good. A complete contrast to Doctor Who, John Pertwee era, where they were trying to do a similar thing. All the best to you and your mum. Stay warm. Thank you very much, Rocket. The difficulty here is thinking about your past again, and then coming up with 10 or so that you've asked for. And I think that most of those are probably well known. But I did write, what I like to tend to do is think a little bit, mention the ones that are at the top of your mind, and then go back and probably spark off one that might be not so well thought of. So my greatest pleasure probably was when I was between primary school and secondary school, and we had the luxury in this country of having a children's television workshop and a big drama department aimed at educating children, but also adapting books and so forth into plays, which would not have the best special effects, but they could still take you into a wonderment, depending on which year you were at. There have been some great programs, and I'm going beyond the children's stuff of Finger Bobs and Bagpuss and Clangers and so forth. The dramas that I think of back in the day are things like that I don't think get mentioned too much either these days. It's like Children of the Stones. Now, Children of the Stones was a children's program on ITV that was a drama series, and it's that mystery of things like Stonehenge and those round stones that we've got. And where I nearly live, there is nearly live, there is a set of stones called the Rollright Stones. And the Rollright Stones are literally a village just near me, and it's where Doctor Who's episode with Tom Baker was filmed. And a friend of mine actually managed to get to see some of it being filmed. I could never actually get there. I couldn't drive. My dad was working shifts, 6 till 2, 2 till 10. And we are talking when I was below 10 years old. So it would have been pretty difficult for my dad to have turned that around. But I'd have loved to have met Tom Baker in those early years. But I'm moving apart again a little bit here. Children of the Stones attracts your interest because the stones are menacing. There is something secret going on. It's affecting time. They surround this village. There's an energy about it. And from that point of view, you wanted to watch it. And they only made one season of it, and there was only 6 episodes. But it stays in my mind even now just how effective that was. And a couple of years later, they tried to do a similar thing again, only this time it was called Into the Labyrinth. And this was even more of a program that I wanted to watch each week. Okay, I'd now grown up a little bit more. The children irritated me because they were how I was 3 or 4 years ago. And that annoys you when you're in your very early, like, just reached your teens. And that show was Into the Labyrinth. And Into the Labyrinth was filmed in, I think, Cheddar Gorge. There's some caves at Cheddar Gorge. And the story behind it is that there was a battle between good magic and bad magic. And there was the person that we were cheering on by Ron Moody called Rothgo. Now, Ron Moody is a very good character actor. He's one of those character actors that I label really great because they acted well, but they've got that kind of face that has got the lines in their face that give you that character. And he had that type of face where you could sort of see him as being a dungeon master or a wizard keeper or something. And then there was the evil Belor, who was played by Pamela Salem. Now, what was this all about? Well, the kids stumbled upon a cave. They saw that Rothgo was diminished in his magic, and he had this big map that looked like a maze. And inside this maze was separated by bits of time. And when you went into the maze, he wanted for you to look for something called the nidus. And the nidus could only be seen in reflection. You can see how this was affecting kids. It's like, wow, so we're looking for this magical thing called the nidus. We can only see it in reflection. When we go into this maze, we're going to be transported into time. We're going to be in the Elizabethan era or even earlier and forward, or in a war situation or whatever. And that lasted a lot more seasons. But as you grew out of it. And I must admit, I remember being invigorated by the first couple of seasons. And I think it dropped off a little bit later on. But I still just remember with fondness how captivating it all was. We'll have to move on quite quickly. But the Tomorrow People must get a mention, but the Tomorrow People is one of those ones that's well known, sort of. There's a famous story where Peter Davison was in, I think, about the 6th or 7th season of this, and he says that every time he winces when it's repeated on telly, and it was a very early part of him doing his acting, and he wasn't wearing too much, apparently, in the story. So he's very embarrassed by it. But to me, the Tomorrow People was captivating right from the very beginning because of how the titles, the main titles and the end titles were constructed. The beginning titles started off with this stop motion photography of a hand coming towards you and slowly opening, and then panning back and doing the same thing. And while that's going on, you saw these images of hexagons and sort of like bees in gel and all sorts of stuff, while this hand kept coming, and then it would show you the title and what this title was this week, and then the program would start, and then right at the end they had one of them oil lamp type things, only this oil lamp sort of dropped from the right hand side, bent round and came up the other side, which would happen sort of in one of those lava lamps. But the lava lamps that we used to have were so tight that all they did was just go up and down. They never sort of like separated and went round like this. They'd turn into a big ball, then drop, and then come back up. And then so they were so tight, there was no movement. This was expanded. It sort of went round the camera lens. It was really quite good. Now here's one that is an American show that came to my mind, I don't know why, this week. And I think it was because there was something on telly about the moon. And when I was thinking back at my childhood, when I was doing some of this, looking back, there was a show called Salvage 1. Now, what it was is a very simple premise. There was a junk man, sort of like Albert Steptoe from, Steptoe and Son. He decided that he had a junk place and he wanted to build a spaceship of his own, fly to the moon, and bring back any junk that's up there back and sell it. That's the premise of the show. It didn't last very long, one season, a couple of episodes, but I'll never forget, wow, just think there could be junk men in Britain that have got the same idea, that they wanted to fly to the moon and pick up all the crap that's up there and bring it back. Great memories of that. And I think I was watching that at the same time as another show called Big John, Little John. Where it's like a Freaky Friday type thing where you swap minds with your dad, and it had a famous actor in it. I think his surname was Judd. He was in Taxi, I think. And it was just one of those shows which hit you at a time where, wow, what would be a wicked thing that would be if my dad and me swapped bodies. Now, the next one I'm talking about, again, is probably well known. But Quatermass was something that I loved as a kid. I'll never forget the one story that I think everybody remembers, which is the ones that affect the tube station at Hobbs Lane, I think it was called, where the alien spaceship was discovered. It was thought to be a missile from the war. Actually, it was an invasion craft. Great. But the next Quatermass story was a 4-part miniseries with John Mills. And again, it was based around those stones that I was talking about earlier. Only these stones were going to be used as portals for the hippies and the young folk at the time, where they thought that if they chanted, a beam would come down and take them to a better place. And it was found out that this beam actually was not taking them to a better place, it was incinerating them. 1 season, 4 episodes, film-like length episodes. I've got it on Blu-ray. I go back to it sometimes, but it takes me to that place where mystery again sort of like comes in. And then of course we talk about Moonbase 3, and I have a similar memory to Moonbase 3. The problem with Moonbase 3 was I think it's what it tried to do was in far reach of what it could do with its budget, just like I was talking about with Star Trek 5. It was more about the reality of it all. What goes through people's minds if they're stuck in space and there's no way that they get back. So there's a psychological aspect of it. What can you do if astronauts go missing on a mission? Have you got the equipment to get them back? That sort of stuff, and made into a drama, and it only lasted, like I say, about 6 episodes, I think. And it was very well done. And you have to think to yourself, why didn't they do another one? And I think the BBC probably wanted to put whatever little coffers they could scramble back from not making that show back into Doctor Who or something else. And in many ways, yes, they stretched themselves, and they tried it again later on. Blake 7 would come along, and that would last only 4 seasons, and money for that was tight, and so they would put that money into something else. So there isn't really much else to talk about, because I think most people know about Wurzel Gummidge and those types of shows. So, the Animals of Farthing Wood comes to mind. I don't know why. That's just something that's just come into my brain just now. But I hope that answers some of the shows that gave me great delight when I was a kiddie. Maybe they brought back some memories to you guys. And what an interesting question. Thank you so much. So then we come to Denny. See how long that one took. Denny, so again, he mentions some of the things that I was talking about last week, about the snow was not supposed to hit us, that the snow probably isn't going to be the bad thing, it will be the cold snap afterwards, and damn wasn't he right. The snow was there for a day, it's still there now, and it's not snowed since. It's just been damn cold. It's been so cold that I couldn't start my car once this week, which came as a surprise, and the cold snap has basically diminished the battery. Now, I think that's happened because when I had my car valeted, he kept the doors open, so it weakened the battery. And then with me not driving around all the time anymore, and only needing it on occasions where I need to pick up something big for my mother, I've tended to find that I've got to now charge the car up, and now we have the rub. My father's not around anymore. I have to go by what he taught me. I think this battery is in a brand new car, so he might have come a little bit stuck. But they either come in sealed units or non-sealed units, and I always remember my father saying that when you charge a battery up, you can do a quick charge or you can do a slow trickle charge. And whichever way you look at it, it's like boiling a kettle. Some batteries which are not sealed have circular holes at the top that you can unscrew with a screwdriver, and you take those off, and that meant that the gases could be released. Very important. He also talked about the water that needed to be above the metal rods that are in there. As long as the water's covering it, you're fine. But this is a brand new car. My father's not around anymore. There are symbols on it now that says, whatever you do, don't put the electrical clasp over this because it contains electronics. So obviously, combined with the battery, there's this circuitry that my father wouldn't know about that probably controls things like the alarm system. So do I unscrew and unbolt the battery and take it off and trickle charge it, or do I quick charge it and then go on a long run, which would probably be the best? But I did that once last week, and I went for a run which I thought, a quick run in the car, which was about 10 miles. Of course, we had the cold snap this week. I went to do something on Friday, and the battery was dead again. So I've got to look at that this week. But so just to get back, Denny, yes, that cold snap, you were dead on. Christmas is obviously different for everybody. Everyone can't disagree with that. He mentioned some of the stuff. He managed to also get a Doctor Who Season 2, which is brilliant. He's got his Crash and Zap annuals. Yes, folks, those Crash and Zap annuals are going fast. Get them quickly. And he bought a film as well, Trancers 4, and he's very happy in the fact that the Next Generation film box sets will also be in 4K. And he has a question for me. Which Irwin Allen TV production did you like the best? From Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, Time Tunnel, and Land of the Giants. And why is that? And that's quite easy, really, because it's funny, but I remember Irwin Allen from a very early age, but I appreciated him more in my early teens when my dad introduced me to the films like Earthquake and The Poseidon Adventure and The Towering Inferno, and that's where he got his name, the Disaster Master, because he was well into those long films where there's a single object with lots of people in it, and that's the focus of how are we going to get these people out. So he did some Great shows. Most of them had John Williams soundtracks as well. So Voyage of the Bottom Sea was brilliant. Time Tunnel, quite light, although I found that one to be not like Doctor Who, but more educational. Land of the Giants, you can only take so far. I'm glad that Hollywood came around and did Honey, I Shrunk the Kids to show just what a land-breaking show that was in the 60s. But my favourite would always be Lost in Space. And the reason for that is that it's a family lost out in the middle of space that want to get home. And there's an evil person, you know, the Doctor inside that Lost in Space, that brought a comedy element and a menacing element along with the daily show of what's happened now that they've landed on another planet while they're trying to hop back home. And of course we know the film, which was a bit of a disaster. But I think it's that robot, the boy, Bill Mummy, I think it was, and Dr. Zachary Smith that held that show together for as many years as it did. And I sometimes go back to it because, I mean, at the end of the day, people now know I love the Outer Limits and the Twilight Zone. They were always considered sometimes the monster of the week show. And Lost in Space is no different. Having people dress up as giant carrots and chase after the Robinson family, you know, it sounds bad, but when you watch it, you go, I was entertained. That was a great show. But that doesn't take anything away. Voyage of the Bottom of the Sea and everything, love those as well. I just, Lost in Space had that happy element to it with a bit of menace. And of course, you always wanted to know, did they get home? So that's great. Just going to have a little drink. Product placement. I hope you love your eggnog later on this week. LFC, thank you LFC for commenting, by the way. Brilliant. He's a fan of Cheers, so of course he reflected with me about Kirstie Alley last week dying. But the question that he got for me this week, here's a question. What are your go-to films that you always watch on Christmas Day but have nothing to do in common with the festive season? Think of films like the Bond films, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and so forth and so forth. And yes, we have to understand here that back in our childhoods, we didn't have the shows that they'll show this Christmas, which will be full of animation. It will be, you know, the Fergal Rainforest. It will be Lion King. It will be lots of that Ratatouille and all that sort of stuff. And what we had as kids was Noel Edmonds going to children's hospitals and waiting for a film to get all the stuff out of the way until the Queen's speech, which this year will be the King's speech. And the films that I used to watch would be those Chitty Chitty Bang Bangs, the Italian Mob, the Great Escape, the war films, you know. But I also remember watching all those Doug McClure films, At the Earth's Core, you know, The Land That Time Forgot. Some of the Sinbad films, the Ray Harryhausen films that I used to watch. And I dare say those would have been what I considered to be the go-to films. But as we approach this Christmas, I won't be watching those. It's funny. I'll probably get up, wish my mum a happy Christmas. We'll open our presents together if we've got any, if Santa's been really kind to us. Then I'll be helping my mum with the dinner. I'll go into my room and watch whatever's on TV because I can't be asked to get off my backside and think what film I want to watch. And then we'll be having our meal and the King's speech, and then it'll be whatever's on TV again. And I think maybe this is where the getting old part has taken the magic away a little bit, LFC. But I really enjoyed your blog this week. Thank you so much. And I hope at least you got something there about go-to films. Really, those Doug McClure films, at the Earth's core, the land that time forgot. They're great for Christmas, you know. It was a nice memory for me to go back to. And then we get to Colin Jones. We know Colin Jones, wonderful. Always has time for me in his comments. Unfortunately, he had very little to say this week. He's a very busy person. He's also had a bit of a sadness that's happened with a family pet this week. But he reminisced about the Muppet Christmas Carol. And I'm going to use his segment just to go back to what I was saying last week, because I was asked a question about a go-to Christmas film. And when you talk about a go-to Christmas film, I'm talking about the film that makes you think it's Christmas, not necessarily the film that is the best film at Christmas. So I'm going to expand upon it. So I love Scrooged, and it signifies to me Christmas is here. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation is a proper Christmas film that I can't not watch each year. But the one film that I can't miss, and the one that I will put on at Christmas if it's not on TV, is It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart is obviously a famous actor, but one of those actors that really makes you care for whatever character he's trying to portray. And It's a Wonderful Life is such a powerful film because it talks about what if you weren't around? What if you never existed? What would life look like? Because you need to reflect and look back at yourself and say, you are important. And that's the message. And so I find that a powerful message for me to revigorate in me each year. So I'm tempted and always tend to put that film on every year to remind me I am important. I've got a voice. And you've got a purpose, even if it's just to look after my mum at the moment. So I'm glad I expanded upon that, even if Colin didn't really have time. Everybody's busy at the moment, and this is where I appreciate it. Wee Bob Art also commented. Now, he's really trying to help me shape my show, and I'm definitely going to find some time to speak to him and take up some of his lessons. He's talked about snapshots, pictures, all of that sort of stuff. And I need to look upon this because I don't want to change too much about what I do. I've got everything encompassed in a name. Del Boy and the retro bit. I love the Twilight Zone, Retro Zone. Ox gave me that idea and I love it. And I don't do too much in this other than a blog and some gaming, right? And I reminisce about some TV stuff. So what I'm trying to say is that having them under separate channels, I don't know whether that's a good idea, but I definitely would be happier if I just had that knowledge that there's enough people around to give me a question each week, and I panic each week that I'm going to have to come up with a topic and I'm going to see the numbers dwindle down and I'm just going to get depressed. So I definitely will be having a chat with him. And then we have good old Steve. We always do the salute to Steve. Steve. Yeah, there you go, you bastard. Right. Brilliant what Steve was writing this week. Again, he's very busy. He's doing his advent calendars at the moment and they're very funny. I do really hope you watch his shows. We'll touch upon it a little bit later on. But he's got some questions. So he says, 1. What was the last 8 or 16-bit game video you watched that had you loading the game and playing it yourself? Well, I'll tell you what. I don't watch too much beyond you guys. And Mainmeister and Panther are like mentors to me. So whenever they bring out a video or whenever they're doing a live stream, I'm constantly there writing down what games people want him to play. And when those come up, in my head, I remember what they are. But there's always the odd one that comes up that goes, Oh, was it called that? Did it have another name? You get the gist. And then when it comes up, it's like, oh wow, yeah, I've forgotten all about that game. So the answer really is very quickly for you, Steve, is that happens all the time, but it happens mainly during a MainMeister show, stream than it does any other. I've actually had a couple of yours where I've done that, possibly one or two with Rob, but the difference between you and Rob is that you're a bit more wide-ranging, Steve. Rob is more Atari, and I had an Atari for quite some time. So I saw a lot of those and played a lot of those games. So what I'm doing with Rob there is reminiscing, and what I'm doing with yours, Steve, is reminiscing if I've seen it, and then learning something if it's new. So that's why you dovetail quite well, because you're two different people, two different channels. So that answers that. 2, what was the best Christmas present you ever got as a kid? Oh, wow. Now that's hurtful, really, because as a kid, you loved them all, didn't you? You know, you were always waiting for that big one. The one that your mum and dad got you. And, you know, the one that was the most expensive. But I can't take away the fact that there was some stuff around my family that bought me things like Evel Knievel and Simon and Merlin and those other things that shaped who I am. I mean, I remember getting great enjoyment from Operation, the Mad Doctor's game. You need a very steady hand. Oh, for God's sake, I sound like the advert. And I'll talk about adverts possibly in another time. But yes, the big ones would be the ones that I was really sorting for. And sometimes that'd be a bike, and other times it'd be a piece of electrical equipment. But my dad got me my computers that I had for the mainstay, you know, the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64. He made me save up, and I had to give him my savings. But I knew at that point what Christmas was all about, and he would get the main thing, but then he'd surprise me with an extra thing that didn't come with it, you know, like a cartridge or a tape deck. And that's where my savings would go. They would have bought the little thing that went with it. Otherwise, I'd be switching it on and I'd be typing in just game listings, which happened with the VIC-20. I think my dad learnt the mistake with the Commodore 64. So I hope that answers your question. And last week, Carl Todd asked a question and I missed it because he did it on the day of the blog. And that's always a danger because I record quite early. So he said, you mentioned working on the Millennium Bug, which is something that I also worked on. Sometimes this gets brought up in conversations. And some people think that because there was no disasters that happened at the start of the 2000, that the whole thing was some conspiracy. Have I ever met people that thought that? Yes, of course I have. No, it wasn't a conspiracy. What was going to happen was an unknown. Now, I worked in the banking sector. The banking sector worked on mainframes, and we had done IBM XT terminals. And therefore, the mainframe, which we didn't have control of, really, because they were scattered around the country, had a piece of software for their banking software. The trouble was, they're not custom made, these. They're bought in. The software is off the shelf generally, but then custom made to adapt to your customers, right? Now, the hardware that was around wasn't future proof, and therefore there were only 2 digits for the year. So as we get to 99, it would have flipped to 00 and then 01 without knowing that we've changed century. So of course, what does that mean? Well, for certain computers, that wouldn't have even happened. It would have actually have gone back to the BIOS's earliest date. If you've ever switched on a Dreamcast when the battery's gone, you'll see that you have to set the date, and it goes back to a specific date written in its hardware software, the BIOS, the basic input-output system. So that's what would have happened with the banks. And you extend that then into bigger things like air traffic control, and people got scared. And what you have to understand is that, as I've learned, people don't put money into building the infrastructure that much. So they stay with the same hardware that's been proud to them for years, and don't buy anything new because that's dangerous and costly. So yes, everybody thought it was a con. Some people came up to me and thought it was a con. I helped and wrote some of the stuff that was going on for the banks, and even people along the street would come up to me. I knew that their BIOS in their machines was going to change, so I helped with them. I don't think you can get away from the fact that people will always be scrutinizing something. So I hope that answers your question on that. And then I was talking about Manchester, and the difficulty that I had with that is that I couldn't think of the names of the places. Well, of course, there was Sale and Sale Moor, Northern and Northern Moor. Altrincham was pretty much where I was working. Didsbury was where I lived. Northern Moor was where I lived afterwards, so I moved into the lower area. Salford and Salford Quays. Now, Salford had a very bad reputation. Salford Quays is now an up-and-coming place, and it's where the BBC are now at when they moved out of BBC Centre in London. So there's some of the places that I was around. If you wanted to know, I worked for Lloyd's TSB Commercial Factors Limited. They were the factoring side of the bank. I could talk about factoring if you want, but we won't at this stage. They lived along the Altrincham Road. The Altrincham Road, when it gets to a certain point, has Lloyd's on the left-hand side. You move up a little bit further, and TGI Fridays was just before the bridge. Get over the bridge, and you got to Altrincham. If you go past Altrincham, you were heading towards the Manchester United football ground, and that's where I was talking about PC World. That road is so in my head, because for 7 years I travelled from Northern Moor to get to work. So, brilliant. And that answers all the questions. Thank you so much, guys. We now usually talk about what I've watched, and I've watched, outside of you guys, This Week in Retro. It was good this week. Don't get me wrong. I keep making it sound like it's bad. This Week in Retro is a program that I watch on YouTube every week. There is always something that I find interesting. They did Jaguar emulation and Amiga 2000 on a PC-based board this week, and it was very interesting. Tech Mode is great because it takes me back to a time where hi-fis and audio equipment were king for me. You know, I always had a Walkman, I always had a CD player, I was always looking for the best tape player to go in my car, which would fast forward to the next track and listen out for that gap and all that sort of stuff. So he started to review what they call VUE meter headsets, which, if you think about it, is an anomaly in a headset, because VUE meters are those little dials that you have, you know, where you can tell the sound is coming through and whether they're peaking. They're on your ears, so how can you see them? They'll only be good for anybody that's watching you with your headset on. Yeah. So the thing that was interesting about this was he bought himself these headsets for review purposes earlier this year, where they were $115. But in this country, they're £300. That's a bloody huge difference. And they're not that great. They're Bluetooth, they've got noise cancellation, all of that stuff. But they're huge because these meters stick out. You look like, I don't know, some out of Star Wars. You look like Carrie Fisher, you know, Princess Leia with them on. Anyway, that's worth a watch. Retro Recipes I watched just at the end of yesterday. He always puts his stuff out generally Saturday night. And he was trying to get his TV to work from home in America, which has been transported to America with his current new desk setup. And of course, he couldn't get the frequencies to work. He put it down to the 50 or 60 hertz frequency rate that would have been the problem, but he also thinks maybe that the telly's got a bad resistor or capacitor or something that makes it go out of range in its frequency pickup. I won't go into anything more than that. The phone is ringing again. Bloody hell. You'd think people wouldn't ring you up this early in the morning. By the way, if you want to know, it is 9:45 in the morning. Here we go. Word for Buy. So Word for Buy did something. I don't really watch a lot of Word for Buy, but I do. There's the odd one that catches me out. He did something brilliant. He did a comparison of what games we were playing in 2002 and what crap has come out in 2012. And when you look at the list of the 2002 games, there were 783 games in 2002. And you look at the top 10, and you look at the top 10 this year, and you look at the caliber of these titles, you would turn around and go, yeah, we were having much better fun in 2002. Definitely worth a watch. And then I watched the BBC Archive bring out a children's nationwide special from 1975, where they got the children to do a special broadcast of the best and worst Christmas toys and why they consider them bad. I liked that so much I put it in the Discord channel. That's pretty much what I watched on YouTube this week. Other than I watched Ponder. So he did an 8-bit versus 16-bit challenge video. That's going on great guns. If you're not participating in that, definitely think it's worth you doing. I think the challenge this week is to play the Mega Drive version of Mickey Mouse game, and then if you participate, show an 8-bit game that you consider to be something that would impress a person that was brought up on Mega Drive titles. He also did a little stream on GigaWing for, I think it was for a high score reason. Great stuff, Ponder. Thank you very much. Keep all that stuff going. We've already talked about Steve. Steve did his Christmas Advent stuff, and that was brilliant. Get great enjoyment out of that for the reasons that I've said, really. Sorry, the salute, forgot. He's told me now that his teeth don't come out at night. No, they usually fall out during the day. But I get great enjoyment watching Steve's stuff. Now, Denny, who I mentioned earlier, who comments so much on my stuff, he did a video of the first 21 levels of Moose Life. Now, Moose Life is one of those games where you really, really, really have to play it, and you'll get addicted. Because if you look at it from a certain perspective, which is just the visuals and listening to the sounds, you can get some, you will get enjoyment from that. But of course, my mum, when she saw it, she said, what are all these blips and blobs? What am I doing? Why am I suddenly on the ceiling? You know, you can't. It's a little bit beyond for my mum in her 80s. But for me, it takes me back to my childhood, playing all of those laser zones, Matrix, hover bothers, you know, Ancipital, all of those lovely Jeff Minter games, Revenge of the Mutant Camels, Attack of the Mutant Camels. I could go on and on and on. And it's just fantastic, you know, to look at a new game. But this time I do mine with VR, but it's equally as playable without VR. Definitely worth watching. Go now and watch Denny's channel on the 21 levels of Moose Life. And then LFC. So he did his blog. He's now joined the Blu-ray team. Yes, he's got himself a Blu-ray player. It's been out for a while, LFC, but it's nice to see you at the party, even if you have come a little bit late. But no, it's up to you when you feel right to go and do these things. I mean, I've got 4K, I brace technology, I've got to have the latest thing. If it's something that I'm going to watch every day, if I'm going to watch something every day, then I want the thing to be the best, because I don't want to be looking at crap, right? And if I'm not working, if I'm not driving, then basically I'm at home. And if I'm at home, I'm generally watching a film or something, right? That's the normal cycle. So the TV is important, the sound system is important, the car I drive in is important, and being comfortable at work is important. So those are the things that where most of the money goes into when it comes to comfort. You know, if I do a lot of walking, I want some good shoes. I don't want cheap that give me blisters. See what I mean? Works like that. And then what have I watched? Not a lot. I can tell you now, I've been on the Valheim server with Rocket Bunny, and we've had some great times. We've had some chats. But that's not the reason why I haven't watched a lot. There hasn't been a lot to watch. So, other than Willow, I basically have put in more, concentrating more on the films that I've been buying recently. So I've been watching Scrooged, It's a Wonderful Life, Christmas Vacation. Not to get me into the mood, but because those are the shows that and the TV I want to watch at this close to Christmas. And I need to get caught up with some of the things that are piling up behind me. So that is it. An hour. Not bad. Haven't really got a topic for you, other than I will say this. This week has probably been the hardest week for me to get anything done. But the one thing I'm the most proud of is, as I told you about an old lady who lived down the street when the meters needed to be read. And I helped her by phoning her son up and just letting her know that she seems to be okay, and I've helped with the meter reading. This week I've knocked on her door again, and she's in good spirits, but she's not in a good way. And I helped to get some of the shopping for her. Well, why not when I'm getting my mother's? I've kept in touch with her son, and he's thanked me. Got a card from him for Christmas. It's nice. And all I can say to you is, if you ever do have some spare time, if you're in the same situation as me where not many people turn up and that, it's nice to do something for the community. And this lady now has offered me in for a cup of tea, and she's told me a little bit about her life, what she did in her younger times. And you know, it's not the same. I need the type of friend that I need is the friend that can speak at the level that I'm at, and the people that that could get me out and having a pint outside. It wouldn't be an 80-year-old, but I've taken great pleasure this week knowing that I've done something good. That's the thing. And the last thing we come to is what's arrived this week. Well, as you know, the Royal Mail is such a big problem at the moment. We've had strikes, and so half of the stuff, including presents that I've bought for other people, are trapped in the Royal Mail holdage bays. But there have been some things that come this week. So, sorry about my camera. It's this low light. And I have, by the way, bought the light system that my friend Ponder gave. Oh, this damn tech phone. I'm going to have to put that on silent, aren't I? Or I'm going to have to make it a Christmas tune for next week. Pick up. Thank you. So we've got the Outer Limits. Only, why have I got the Outer Limits when it's something that we know that I've got? It's the Blu-ray edition. I missed the opportunity of buying the Outer Limits on Blu-ray when it first came out, and it was split up into two boxes, the first season and the second season. If I wanted to buy the second season from Amazon now, if you look at the price, it's like £80. They've repackaged it now in cheaper packaging, so you can see it's one big folder now. Look, you can see it's Blu-ray. in a flimsy box. But they've fixed any issues that were now with those first two box sets and done it in new packaging. And I literally bought it because I want to replace my DVDs in it. So that's one thing out of the way. Steelbook RIPD came out. I forgot I pre-ordered this. Not a great film. Even the special effects are not that great. But it is a popcorn entertaining film. The Steelbook doesn't look too bad, you know, from what you can see on there. It's in 4K, so hey, might go back to that. This is from Italy. It is the Sonic films, but both of them together. And I actually never bought, I don't think, the Steelbooks that were released in the UK. But I went to a channel which I normally go to, I think it's Euphoria Pictures, and he said he'd bought this from Italy and it was on sale and it was cheaper than in Britain. And the Steelbooks are absolutely gorgeous. So with that, I looked at the price. Because I'm a Prime, it basically had no postage. I paid no customs on it, and I got it half the price of what Xavi is selling this at. And it's a different set of pictures on the Steelbooks, which are in there. I might do an unboxing one day, you know, if any of you guys like it. And then there is the one I've been waiting for absolutely ages. They took my money months ago. It's only just turned up. And that is the Frighteners Ultimate Edition. And it's from Germany. Notice the 16 sticker on the right hand side to show you that it's a German release. This is the deluxe new artwork edition. If you ever buy the new artwork edition, the old artwork is inside. If you buy the old artwork box, then the new artwork is on the inside. So you get both, even if depending on which one you wanted to choose. You can see it's a very shiny box. Everything on there, if you want to read it yourself, is great, but it's in German. But that's okay, because German is the power system, and of course the language will be English as standard. So basically I've heard nothing on here. There are 6 discs to The Frighteners. The Frighteners is a very underrated film. I wanted to buy that because I thought that they didn't do a very good service when it was released over here. Michael J. Fox he had a phenomenal run, if you think about it. After Back to the Future, the Doc Hollywood, the Bright Lights, Big City, the Frighteners, he had a phenomenal run before retiring, and ended too soon, really, to be quite honest. And I wish him well with his Parkinson's. And these are my favourites for this week. Now I can only show you 3 because the 4th one is still in the post. These are what they call the Vault editions of famous films, and there are 4 in the series. This one is Blade Runner. This arrived on Monday. It is number 1 of the 4 in the set, and every single one of them has lobby cards, posters, but most importantly it's numbered 1 to 3000, for which you get a crystal with a personal etching of your number. I think you can see the crystal just there. So inside there is a lead crystal Blade Runner etched personal block for me with my number in it. And the artwork is just gorgeous. Just, I don't know if you can see that if I put it in the right light. That is a matte picture of the building, where you can see Rutger Hauer there sitting cross-legged. There's the bird flying. You know, gorgeous. Absolutely wonderful. And as I said, it's one of 4. So what's the second one? Goodfellas. Again, look at that matte picture with the 3 gangsters firing into the boot of the car before they're going to... You can see that Joe Pesci's got his knife ready to stab him, and they're going to bury that gangster in that forest behind. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, you can see it's number 2 on the back. Again, you've got the lead crystal personal numbered with the lobby cards. Just absolutely gorgeous. These are not cheap, but it's what I consider the quality of these. These are a collaboration between Warner and Universal, of which there are only 3,000. I think you can still get them, but don't quote me on that. And the third of the fourth is equally good. Scarface. Look at that picture. You can see Al Pacino, look, with the river of blood going from his desk towards the door in that famous last scene. Wonderful. Absolutely gorgeous. And again, as you can see on the back, you get the crystal with the art cards, green cards, the film on 4K and Blu-ray. Wonderful. Individually, again, this is number 3 of 4. I don't know my actual number, but it's one of 3,000. So really looking forward. Hopefully it'll be the low numbers. And I won't tell you quite what the 4th one is, because it might arrive and I can show it you at Christmas. Sorry, now this low light is really starting to get here now. There we go. That's the end. Thank you so much. Salute and all the rest of it. But I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, because the next broadcast will be on Boxing Day. I do everything weekending. It just happens to work out that way. Every one of you is important to me. I'll be around, you know, if there's a live stream going on. I'll be watching your stuff and commenting. And that's all I can really say, other than I will miss you guys until next week, when I start talking to the camera again. And with that, Merry Christmas, and roll on this next new year. Bye-bye.